There's a particular kind of silence that only certain things in this world can produce. Not the silence of an empty room, not the silence of a paused conversation, but the silence of something so composed, so thoroughly considered, that the world around it seems to quiet down out of respect. The 2026 Range Rover Autobiography produces that kind of silence, and the moment you understand why, you'll never look at a luxury SUV the same way again. Land Rover didn't announce this car loudly. There was no stadium reveal, no celebrity cameo, no pyrotechnics. They simply let it appear, and trusted that the people who needed to notice it would. That restraint tells you everything about who this vehicle is built for, because the 2026 Autobiography isn't trying to impress everyone. It's trying to say something specific to a very particular kind of person. Someone who has already arrived. Someone who no longer needs to explain themselves. But before we get into what this car does right, we need to talk about what Land Rover was actually trying to solve. Because this wasn't just a refresh, this was a reckoning. For years, the Range Rover sat at an interesting crossroads. Beloved, iconic, but quietly being pressured from every direction. Bentley sharpened its Bentayga. BMW pushed the X7 into spaces it was never supposed to occupy. Mercedes stretched the GLS until it barely recognized itself. And then came the electric challengers. Clean, silent, technologically aggressive, threatening to redefine what luxury even means on four wheels. Land Rover watched all of it, and instead of reacting, they made a choice that most brands in that position are too afraid to make. They went deeper into themselves. They didn't chase the competition. They redefined the category on their own terms. That decision lives in every surface of this car. Look at the exterior, and your first instinct might be that not much has changed. That instinct is wrong, but it's also the point. The 2026 Autobiography carries an evolved design language that operates below the threshold of obvious. The proportions have been refined with surgical precision. The roofline sits with a new confidence. The front fascia is cleaner, more resolved, like a sentence that's finally had all the unnecessary words removed. The flush door handles, the seamlessly integrated lighting, the way the body panels flow into one another without drama. None of it screams for attention. All of it earns it. The new Pixel LED headlights deserve a moment of their own. They don't just illuminate the road. They animate. When you approach the car, they wake up with a sequence that feels less like a startup and more like a greeting. It's a small thing. But small things at this level aren't small. They're signals. They tell you that someone, somewhere in a design studio, spent weeks arguing over a 2-second light sequence because they understood that luxury isn't a specification. It's an accumulation of moments. And this is where the story becomes impossible to ignore. Because when you open the door, and the way it opens matters, the weight of it, the arc of it, the soft mechanical exhale as it reaches its limit, you step into something that recalibrates your expectations in real time. The cabin of the 2026 Autobiography isn't just well-appointed. It's architecturally considered. There's a difference, and you feel it immediately. Semi-aniline leather covers surfaces you wouldn't expect. The kind of leather that hasn't been processed into submission, that still breathes, that still carries the subtle topography of something real. The wood veneers, and Land Rover offers several, each one sourced and finished to a standard that furniture makers would recognize, aren't decorative overlays. They're structural elements of the visual composition. Remove them, and the interior loses its logic. They're load-bearing in an aesthetic sense. The seats. Let's stay here for a moment, because the seats in the rear of this vehicle are the clearest expression of what Land Rover was trying to build. These aren't chairs with heating elements. These are environments, 24-way adjustable, with massage functions that don't feel like a gimmick because they've been programmed by people who apparently understand how the human body actually holds tension. Extended leg rests, individual climate zones, neck warmers that deploy with a button press that has exactly the right amount of resistance, not too light, not too stiff. Someone decided what that button press should feel like. That's the kind of decision that separates a great car from an extraordinary one. Overhead, the cabin offers a panoramic sunroof that can be configured to deliver everything from full transparency to near blackout. In between those extremes lives a range of light conditions that you'll find yourself adjusting more than you expect, because the quality of light inside this car actually affects how you feel inside it. That's not an accident. That's environmental engineering applied to a moving room. The Meridian signature sound system, 15 speakers, a dedicated subwoofer, spatial audio processing, fills the space without overwhelming it. And the distinction matters. Lesser systems push sound at you. This one places it around you. At moderate volume, it disappears into the room. You stop hearing the speakers and start hearing the music, which is exactly what a system at this level should do, and almost none of them actually do. Now, the technology. The PV Pro infotainment system has matured. The interface is faster, more intuitive, and significantly less likely to make you feel like you're operating machinery. The curved display that anchors the center console is crisp and responsive, but it knows its place. It doesn't dominate the cabin. It integrates. There's a difference between a screen that's in your car and a screen that's part of your car, and Land Rover has finally landed on the right side of that line. Driver assistance systems are thorough without being intrusive. Adaptive cruise, lane keeping, traffic sign recognition, a 360-degree camera system that renders the vehicle's surroundings with enough clarity that parking something this size stops being an exercise in faith. These systems work in the background, and working in the background is exactly where they should be. Under the hood, the 2026 Autobiography carries a twin-turbocharged inline-six mild hybrid powertrain, producing figures that would have been considered aggressive even in a performance context 10 years ago. But here's what the numbers miss: the delivery. Power in this car doesn't surge. It accumulates. Press the accelerator with intent, and the Autobiography moves with a kind of assured authority that feels less like acceleration and more like inevitability. There's no drama, no theater, just the quiet, absolute confidence of something that has nothing to prove. The air. Suspension is a particular achievement. It reads the road surface continuously, adjusting damping rates in real time, filtering out the texture of the world beneath the wheels with a consistency that makes long journeys feel genuinely different than they do in anything else at this price point. On a rough road, the Autobiography doesn't fight the surface. It absorbs it, dissolves it, translates it into something the occupants never quite feel. That's not comfort engineering. That's isolation at a philosophical level. And the off-road capability, because this is still a Range Rover, and that lineage doesn't get quietly retired, remains formidable. Terrain Response 2 with automatic mode reads the surface and adjusts without asking for input. Wade sensing monitors water depth in real time, ground clearance, approach and departure angles, low-range gearing. All of it remains intact and functional, and genuinely capable in a way that most luxury SUVs gesture toward without actually delivering. The Autobiography will cross terrain that its passengers would never voluntarily seek out, and it will do so without disturbing their conversation. But none of that compares to what the car actually is when you step back and look at it honestly. Here's what Land Rover built with the 2026 Autobiography. They built a refusal. A refusal to follow the electric rush before the technology was ready to meet their standard. A refusal to add visual noise in exchange for visual impact. A refusal to compete on specification sheets when the real competition was happening somewhere else entirely. Because the 2026 Autobiography isn't competing with the Bentayga or the Cullinan the way the automotive press assumes. It's competing with private aviation, with first-class rail, with the idea that the journey between two places should cost you nothing in terms of your mental or physical state. That's the actual product being sold here, not a vehicle, a standard of transit. The person who buys this car isn't choosing it over a cheaper SUV. They're choosing it over not caring about the drive at all. They're saying that the 40 minutes between the office and the house matters, that the 3-hour trip to the country estate should arrive them in a different condition than it found them. That movement through the world can be, if done correctly, a form of restoration rather than a form of expenditure. Land Rover has understood this for decades, but the 2026 Autobiography is the clearest expression of that understanding they've ever produced. There's that silence again, the kind that follows something that didn't need to explain itself, the kind that a machine earns when every decision inside it